Hey everyone, welcome to the TapsTrades channel where I help keep you up to date on all things Ecomi, Veve, and the NFT crypto space. I have a very exciting guest with me here today, so help me in welcoming Veve content creator, digital collectible NFT savage, Chad or NFT Pirates. Welcome, man.
Thanks, Taps. So excited to be here, man. It's been a long time coming, so thanks for having me on, my man.
Yeah, it's fun. It's great to actually like meet you. I would say in person,
Thanks,
but
Taps.
we're
So
not in the
excited to
same
be
room or
here, man.
anything. But
Yeah, it's true, and it's like for a long time too. We've been kind of thinking about getting together and having a chat. So it's great that we can finally make it happen. So this is awesome. Well, I think you're muted, Taps. Sorry, buddy. I think you're muted, man.
Yep. So I was gonna say we've got a whole bunch of people in here. Real Randy Chavez, thanks for the super chat. NFT Jeremy, we've got the whole fam in here. Enemy Fuzzball. So thanks everyone for tuning in. Hit that like button. Let the fam know that we're here. Yeah, it's funny. We were just connecting, getting our audio and all that, and I was like, oh man, this is happening right when the marketplace is about to open. He's like, it's open. I was like, oh, I don't have time to get in there and like scoop some deals, but yeah, it's exciting to get in this, and then right when I'm done with this, I'm hopping in that marketplace.
Yeah, it's true. It's not the best timing because I too saw like a partner statue at like 12.6K right now. Things are flying, man. I think Superman was at 1.8K. Todd's at 4.4.
Well, we're gonna get some value out of this. We're gonna have some conversation, and then right after this, we're gonna be hopping in the app. I'm sure just kind of like looking for deals. Hopefully, there's still some for us. But so yeah. Just before we get to some of the the questions and all that, you're up in Canada, right?
Canada, yeah, right in the heart of Toronto here.
Awesome. Have you had a chance to meet with Reese yet, now that he's up there from Australia?
Man, I've been trying, but he's at the other side of the country. So he's in Vancouver, which is
yeah. Well, I mean, I imagine like if you guys could meet up for either like a snowboarding trip or like just grabbing a beer or something like that, that would be awesome.
Totally agree. I'm going to hound him. I just keep texting him because I missed the whole Decon event that you were at. And it must have been amazing to see people in person. So
that's what I told everyone is like our community is amazing, but having everyone there like in person live was whole nother level. Like it was great to meet everyone and just like party together, but also like share in fandom. So yeah, I gotta say it was pretty incredible. And dude, big fan of your channel. So everyone who's not already subscribed to Chad, I highly recommend that you open another tab. Oop, this is the one I wanted to go. Open another tab. Go to NFT Pirates on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe. It's funny, man. I was looking at like your old videos from like 7 months ago, and the very first one is talking about Todd back when they were like still relatively really cheap. Like I'm saying, a couple $100. Next one was Harley Quinn. So your ability to call collectible centric value has been really, really unique and spot on. So like if you guys are not sub to NFT Pirates, go check out his channel. Chad, he does incredible content. This is back when you were doing stuff with your brother.
Yeah, I know. I mean, thanks for saying that. I really appreciate it. And, we've been doing it since day one. And I think it's just because we were obsessed with it. We were in the app 24/7 and nobody was doing this kind of content, right? So we really wanted to give that information to people because we thought there wasn't enough good decisions being made when people were trading. People were trading high edition collectibles that weren't very popular for low edition, scarce, rare collectibles, and it was just a sales tactic. Who had the better sales pitch at that point?
I completely agree. There was a need for that. Like, I think you, Johnny Dunn, Gail, like all kind of do content around specific collectibles today. And there's more now too. And like, I touch on collectibles, but I've always touched on like, I guess the strategic growth of the company, like the overall long value, but you guys touch on like that very, very specific, this is the collectible, where I think it's going to go. And you guys have been right? So I think it was your channel that actually, I was more of like the OMI side when I first started off, but when I started the channel back in March, and then like through your content and Gail's and all that, I was like, man, I need to get some more collectibles. So really happy to get in this with you. And also saw that you had that recent interview with Lewis Morgan, CEO of Gymshark. So dude, well done.
Thanks, man. Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, no, it was crazy. It was funny because one of my friends that I actually helped for collecting reached out to me and he was saying, hey man, you've called some good shots for collectibles, and Lewis is coming in the space and he's looking for somebody to talk with to get more knowledge. And he just hooked me up just like that. And all of a sudden the next day, Lewis was like, come on my podcast. So it's just an unbelievable opportunity. And to see somebody like Lewis, going after all these sub 100 really popular characters. I mean, I know he's got like 5 sub 100 Rizzos and all these insane things. So it was pretty amazing to have him in the space. And just going back to some of those OGs, it was amazing, Taps, because we were such a small niche little YouTube thing back in the day, few hundred subs. I mean, you get 50 subs a month, and nobody was really watching that content because we were such a small ecosystem. So it's amazing now to see some of the exposure and people now diving into this space with us.
Yeah, that was back when it was like super, super early. And like you said, like if you got up to like 1,000 views, you were stoked. You're like, oh, like this, I nailed this video, right? And now there's so much community, there's so many content creators, and there's so many different sides to this company that we all have our own unique kind of click into it. So really happy to see that. And before we get into the questions, again, shout out, I appreciate the super chats. I'm going to get through some of the questions with Chad to take, I put together some pretty strategic questions for him to like kind of go over some of the value of the collectibles and like where he sees it going. And we're going to get into it, but shout out, the super chats will of course take priority on questions. So I appreciate you guys showing the love. And just for a little, people were like, oh, like what was the deal with the Dragon Ball Z? And the whole reason I did that was because shout out to Veve Viral. Like me and Chad were already talking like 2 days before this, like, dude, I would love to have you on my channel to just kind of talk about collectibles and all that. And then he posted this like a day or two like after we were already talking. And I was like, well, we need to set this then soon, because I love that he did this and had to throw it on the thumbnail.
Sweet. Yeah. Thanks for that, Veve Viral. That was pretty cool. And what timing, right?
Yeah, absolutely incredible timing.
Yeah.
And we're going to get the questions, but I mean, you're from Canada and I only have one Canada joke. So I only have one. So let me stop me if you heard it, but do you know how, I guess, the founders named Canada?
I do not know.
So the founders got together, they got a hat. They said, hey, write down 3 letters, whatever letters, we're going to draw them from the hat. And then that'll be the name of our country. And so they threw all these letters in and they started pulling, and they pulled out, they go, C-A, N-A-D-A. And that's how Canada was named.
Dude, that's
really corny jokes, but
I've actually never heard that. I'm going to tell my friends love corny dad jokes, and that's the perfect one. So I appreciate you sharing that. That's a new one for us.
Yes. I brought some value to Canada. Let's go. All right, well, let's get into it, man. So first question, you've been doing this for a while, but what made you actually get into investing in Veve? Like, was that your first kind of branch in investing? And then what kind of led you to have that passion to starting a channel on your own?
Right. So for me, it was all about cryptocurrencies. So I think it was at the time I ended up putting about, $10,000 to $15,000 in different types of cryptocurrencies back in I think it's January. So this was like Zilliqa, Polkadot, like Ethereum. I was just dabbling into all the different ones. And I had some cryptocurrency from back in 2017, but I pulled it out because I saw that huge tanking happen. So I was a little worried. So I was a little more careful. And then I was just looking up some different NFT projects, ones that were more, unknown in nature. And then this one guy is like, you should get into OMI because it's the best kept secret. And he was like, there's a 17-step process. And, this is how it's super early because doesn't even really have a transaction ID yet or anything. And so that's why I got into it, because I was like, oh, if this is something, then I'll just throw some cash in there. So I became a millionaire that first night. I think it was March 9th. And then the next day I woke up and did more digging onto what this project was, and immediately kind of understood what was going on. I was like, wait a second. This is the first time I've seen licensed NFTs. And then it brought me back to my Pokemon card collecting days and knowing, the first ever something in this whole new wave of digital collecting. And I was reading into the white paper, and then I was seeing all the future brands. And then the thing that hooked me was when I went to the Telegram, and people were just going crazy about the importance of these NFTs. Then I learned about Todd McFarlane being the first ever one, speculation about, different types of huge licenses, potentially Pokemon and things coming. And then I said to myself that day, I think it was like on March 10th or 11th, I said, if this project's going to go anywhere, the first ever NFT is probably going to mean something. And then I ended up buying 18 Tods that same day. And that was, 1,000 to like 1,400 or something like that.
How many Tods do you have today? Because I know, and we're going to get into it, but I know you've flipped your way up to some pretty serious money and have made some pretty incredible flips and incredible buys. So I'm curious, like, how many Tods do you have left?
I only have 4 left. So from the amount that I had, to be fair, like there were some cool things that I was leveraging from that. Like that's how I was able to scale my collection. But what I could have done is just fell asleep and woke up in a year from now and made $100,000, right? So it's pretty incredible to see the type of opportunities OMI has.
Yeah, I mean, that's the one thing, right? Is like I always tell everyone, I think OMI is super undervalued, but the Veve Collectibles, I mean, it's kind of a no-brainer. Like I still don't understand how some have not jumped into it because it's so easy to make money with these collectibles. Probably a little bit more difficult now, but I mean, the writing was on the wall, and that's kind of like, again, through like your channel, others, that I was like, okay, I don't have enough collectibles, and have obviously jumped way in since. But
right.
One of the reasons I wanted to connect with you is because I've connected with Brock, I've connected with Dan Schabel, I've connected with a couple other people, but you've shown a lot of success with flipping. And a while back, you've had some pretty stellar flips that we talked about. I'm sure those Tods added up, but I guess can you share some of these moves, whether they're recent or in the past? And then also, do you think there's more value in flipping versus long holding?
Okay, interesting. So I'll start off with the flips and then maybe get into kind of some short-term plays versus like long-term plays. Mm-hmm. So from flipping, like I think the best thing to do is, really the low mint game has been a thing that's been very explorative for me. And I think I was one of the first people to do it. And it's because I knew that a lot of people, not many, but a lot that were involved in Veve were interested into lower mint, so sub 100s, sub 200s. And so then I took the chance of going in, like, let's say there was a really popular NFT that dropped. I would go in and buy a low mint for, let's just say 1,500. And all of a sudden that low mint might have then, that collectible might have run up to $5,000 and that low mint would be worth 10. So all of a sudden you have all this leverage that you can do. So a perfect example of that is a recent one. So as an example, like on the drop, like I never got a Walt, but I was able to get a Mickey hat number 43, which I got for $2,000 on the drop because somebody didn't really understand the worth of it. Immediately flipped it for $7,000 profit.
You said 43?
Yeah, the so Mickey hat number 43.
Like the third lowest mint that you can get.
That's right. That's right. And at the time, I mean, I could have kept it, let's just say, and sold it for $30,000. But you have to think during the Disney Golden Moments week, it's not everybody that might have actually wanted to spend that much so early on. So I was like, let me, take my profits and go. And reinvested into Elsa. And at the end of the week, I ended up getting a 122 Walt, which I just flipped for $24,000 and then reinvested into a lower mint Walt, but then had that cash now for future drops, for instance, Deadpool coming up.
What was your entry for that Walt?
5,000.
So just from the Disney, which happened a month ago, you were able to flip a Mickey hat for, let's say, $5,000, and then you're able to flip a Walt for what, $19,000?
Yeah, for exactly. Yeah.
Man.
Yeah.
Well,
so,
jealous, because that's insane. Good sniping abilities, man. That's awesome.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that. And and in terms of the long-term and short-term plays, so the way that I kind of look at it is like big blue chip IPs. So for instance, when we look at, DC, Marvel, Disney, those kind of things, like that to me is a long-term, slow growing kind of mutual fund. That's the way I see it. As some of these other things that are scarce and built off of hype, that's the stuff that I'm usually looking to flip when there's a lot of excitement around those kind of collectibles. So that's kind of the distinction I make between the two. But if I'm looking at for a long-term play, that's generally the stuff that I'm trying to accumulate.
Got it. Okay. So I guess kind of moving forward now that, we're on Immutable X and all that, are you kind of a mix then of a flipper and a long holder, or are you still kind of are you like leaning more now towards long holding?
So I think it's a perfect mix. I think, there's still some potential massive licenses on the way. So, if I know we always say when Pokemon, but if that ever does become something that we get, I can assure you that that's one of the probably the most infamous NFTs that we'll see, at least in the next few years, that hit any kind of platform. And so I think, at that point, you'd probably want to flip out of some stuff to be able to have leverage for such a significant drop. But anything that's kind of a grail piece, I wouldn't necessarily consider selling that off. So that would be like, my Givenchy partner, Todd, Superman, those kind of pieces. Yeah.
And Coras are grails, right?
Coras are grails, yes.
Okay. Just want to make sure.
Yeah, exactly. And that's nothing against other NFTs or collectibles. I mean, everybody's going to have their own collecting strategy, and this is just the way that I've done it. And the only reason I do it this way is that from Pokemon card collecting, if I would have just had 7 secret or first edition holographic Charizards as an example, I would have been able to make way more money off that than my thousands of Pokemon cards that I had. So I think it's an important thing to realize is that there's only so much money to go around. And when you zoom out and you think about the, millions, if not hundreds of millions of editions of NFTs that are coming to Veve, there's going to be some things in there that are going to be, stand out and stay for the test of time, as others, not that they're going to perish, but they might not just have those parabolic increases or those long-term gains.
Well said. I completely agree. Like, I don't have enough of the grails, but what's good is like, and I know some people who are like our subs on YouTube are not avid in Twitter, but you need to be in some other form of communication with this community, whether it's, the Twitter or Discord or something, or like create like a subgroup or something, because people start bouncing ideas off each other. And so like when we get like an announcement of a drop, people start having those conversations like, is this a grail? Is this a blue chip? And as a community, we kind of decide that narrative, right? And so far they've been pretty spot on, right? Like, so like you were one of the early ones saying Todd is going to be one, and now it's catching up to Riso. And it's like, man, like it's just wild to think like what we are establishing value completely separate from what Ecomi and Veve kind of shows us, right? So it's really us who determine that value. So highly recommend if those are a sub here, I'd really recommend that you're in some form of other communication, because that's where you kind of get that early knowledge on those blue chips and holy grails.
Yeah, that's a great point, Taps. I think, almost when it's on YouTube, you're almost 12 hours too late sometimes, right?
Right.
It's like, when you see the development on it, I think that's the important part to get in early while it's taking off. And we've had a lot of other things that weren't necessarily backed by big blue chip, but people really liked it. Like, for instance, the Labracorn, how it had the rainbow shooting out of its mouth. And it only takes one artist or celebrity to say, this is a really cool one, or people like it for their kids, or they like the AR element. And then all of a sudden that takes off. So as much as we can make calculated decisions and theories about what will take off and draw parallels to the physical world, there's still so much uncertainty. And that's also the fun part of it as well.
Yep, completely agree. Like, that's what we even saw with Wonder Woman, right? Like, it isn't always how many editions it is, or if it's a common. Like, that's one where if you were a common gang, you're like, yes, I got a Wonder Woman, right? Like, you ended up making more with that on ROI than you would getting the Ultra or the Hawk Girl, right? So it's very much like we decide the alpha and like have that conversation internally to determine what's going to go up and stay up. But as one of the early Veve collectible centric channels, I guess, how has your collecting strategy evolved since then? And what tips would you give to new users? I see we have some Lewis Morgan community in here. So I know, and someone said like, oh, I just started collecting 2 weeks. So I guess, like newbie information, what tips would you give to these new users coming in?
Perfect. So the biggest thing that I want to share from the early days that I think has, so many lessons now is back in the day, people were spending $1,100 to $1,200 US to buy a Nightwing, as an example, when Todd McFarlane was sitting there at retail, and people could have bought 11 Todd McFarlanes, but instead they were spending, 10x the amount of money to go buy a Nightwing. And what that shows you is that because Todd's the first ever NFT, it's the first appearance of Batman, and it's just a very popular, iconic NFT, as time progressed, that went up and Nightwing actually stayed the same. Now, that's not to say Nightwing won't go up in the future, but what that shows you is that if you're a new user and you see something like a Wonder Woman for $300, and you know that it's, you know, the most popular or character in 11 different countries. It's loved by everyone worldwide. You know, it's limited to 10,000 editions, and it's a pretty good entry point for you. Then that's something that, you know, could stand the test of time. And despite it having, more editions than something that's more scarce, that's less popular, we're really seeing popularity as one of the biggest deciding factors in something's worth. Now, obviously, you know, the three things, and this is Dan Schwabel's words, is that, you know, you got to look at popularity, scarcity, and utility. And so when you look at a secret rare Spider-Man, you know, 1,000 editions, it's very popular, and there could be future utility, for instance, like a free movie ticket to this new movie that's coming out or whatever, then that's how you get those crazy explosive gains. But I think any new user, you know, investing right now, there's still some great steals, and we'll get into some undervalued NFTs, but you know, I wouldn't be chasing something that's $10,000 to $15,000. I'd be looking at new things that are relatively cheap right now that you could see evolving over time. And then that's how you can build your leverage going forward. And with these drops that we're seeing, it's becoming harder and harder to get a drop. So just so you know, I suck at drops. I'm not the champion of drops. Yeah, right? And so despite not getting a drop, because I'm thinking about the market the whole time, there's still so many opportunities to scale and to your collection to elevate. So I think, you know, obviously try for a drop. They're great and they help out tremendously, but don't feel as though if you're not getting drops, then, you know, Veve can't do anything for you, because there's a ton it could still do.
I'm really happy you said that, because I've had conversations with, you know, people in the comments and on Twitter and all that, and many feel like there's only value to be had if you get lucky on drops. And like a lot of us, we live and breathe in the secondary market, and there's still tons of value. You might pay a premium than what that drop price is, but we've seen things where they'll shoot up, and you might pay like for instance, I just mentioned the Wonder Woman, right? The one that just dropped on DC. It was, I think, $50 on the drop, and I actually got the Hawk Girl on it, and I was like, oh, I got the ultra rare, but I really wanted the Wonder Woman. And turns out I really wanted to be a common gang on that one. But in the secondary, I did pick it up for like right around 200, and then it shot up to, I think, around like $500. So pretty quick flip and way to make money, right? So I'm happy you touched on that, because there's tons of value to be had in the secondary, but you have to know how to snipe pretty quick. You have to be able to identify, you know, what's undervalued, what's overvalued, what could grow with popularity, as you said. Right. But that does kind of lead to the next question. And I know this is a hard one, and like, this is not a pump channel, but at the same time, I'm always curious. And I'm like, since you're so Veve Collectible NFT focused, what would you say are the top 5 undervalued and top 5 undervalued right now?
Perfect. So I've got a little list for you, because I was like, just in case I forget anything. So I mean, the first one that I think is quite obvious and that we already touched on is Wonder Woman, right? So if you look at the comparison to Superman,
and this is undervalued.
Undervalued, yeah. So these are I'll start off with the top 5 undervalued, and then go to the over. So, you know, with Wonder Woman, we looked right now at Superman. It just almost touched $2,000. I don't know what it's at now, but it's probably close to that again. And so Wonder Woman, you know, is one of the top 5 most popular superheroes in the world. And it's ranked, I think, #1 in 11 different countries, especially in Asian countries as well, which we haven't seen a massive amount of users come in yet. And it's a similar supply to Superman. It had 10,000 editions compared to, you know, 8,888. And again, it's like I think it's like 350, maybe $400 right now. So if you're looking at that as a potential next move, that's one. The second one I wanted to bring up is actually Steve Rogers, the FA, so the little Marvel Mighty. So the big discrepancy here is we talk about first appearance as being very important. And in the this stemmed from the comic book world, where if you get a comic book with the first appearance of a major character, that comic book is generally worth, you know, hundreds, if not $1 million, hundreds of thousands, if not $1 million sometimes, depending on the grade. And so now we're entering the digital world, and we're saying, guess what? This major character, this is the first time it's appearing in digital format. So if you're to get that, you know, as one of the first people to get this character, then any other characters that are the same one after, so let's just say you get the first ever Wonder Woman, there might be hundreds, if not thousands, of Wonder Womans in the future that are going to be minted on different NFT platforms, on Veve even. And so people are always going to revert to that first one as being the most important, because it was the first one to hit the blockchain. And so I think that's just a really important concept. So that's when we talk about Steve Rogers. you know, I don't know what the value is, but probably about $75 or something right now. It's the first appearance of Captain America. And if you look over at the common Spider-Man, that went for like 500 gems, and it's a similar edition supply. So again, you could see a huge run up there. Another one I want to talk about is Givenchy Pride. So this got a little bit lost because I think, right? Yeah, and the all-time high was about 8.7K or something, and then it dropped down significantly. I think it's under 6K right now.
I think it's around like 4.6 actually, and yeah, it's really it's low floor.
Oh my gosh, see, that's surprising to me. And I'm going to shout out my buddy Ecomi Homies, you know, who always does the market cap analysis. And he was looking at the market cap compared to Disney, and LVMH, which is the arm for Givenchy Beauty, is worth $400 billion. And this is one of the first commissioned artworks limited to 1952 editions. And it's got the whole message behind it is about inclusivity, equality, and diversity. And that's what that picture represents. And you don't think that, you know, if you look at that market cap, and just, you know, for reference, Disney's market cap is like 300 billion. So if you look at that market cap, you look at the amount of editions, and you think about the type of clientele. This clientele has mega money. And then you think about the potential people. You need one influencer in there like Kim Kardashian to pick one of these things up, and it's game over. You could see that thing moonshot to 50K overnight. And, you know, this is not financial advice, this Taps knows.
None of this is financial advice, by the way. Here. And I'm very much resisting like not hopping in the marketplace while you're listing these. Just like, oh, I need to buy more Steve Rogers. I need to buy. But yeah, sorry, continue.
It's a big one. And so, and then the next one I want to talk about too is just some of the ultra rares of these comics. So the Grail comics. So as an example, you know, you got Marvel #1 that's going for $35,000, limited to 600 editions. And then right behind that, you have an ultra rare for $1,400, limited to 2,400 editions. This comic in real life sold for 1.7 million or something like that at a high grade. And there's only like 50 something copies left in existence. Now, this is the first time, this is also the first time this comic's ever hit, like Marvel's ever produced a comic, right, in digital format on top of that. So, you know, that ultra rare could be a good entry point for somebody. And I think some of those other grails. And then the last ones I'll give you is just, you know, and Taps, you and I actually talked about this, and you gave me the idea about this back in the day when we were chatting, was the first ever set. Okay, we have thousands of sets on the way. We have probably movie clips, clothing, avatars, skins, renting, Viviverse land. I mean, the Metaverse. And what do you think people are going to care about in 5 years' time? They're going to look back at that first ever set and be like, those were the OGs. Those are the people that were clever, smart, and it's going to also represent the earliest stuff on the blockchain. And we just saw that as well. So, you know, and in that set right now, like I think there's like a Joe Madureira that for like less than $400 or $500, right? So that's another really important point to think about.
I completely agree. Like very, very similar choices to mine. And it's you mentioned, I'm happy you mentioned a comic too, because I don't cover comic. I usually like before a comic, like I'll go through like the history, like some of the grading behind it, but I don't go heavy into it like Dozer does on the Comic Way, or like Sean with Cryptos and Comic or Crypto Comics, which I'm actually going to have him on the channel in I think about 2 weeks, and he's going to go all through comics. Like I mean, we're in a similar group where like we're in the same group as him, and the comic knowledge is a whole nother world, right?
Yeah.
So like that's the undervalued, right? And Sleeping Comics too. Like that's the side where like we could use more content creators who only touch on comics, who are comics experts, but the ones that we have are bar none experts. So I'm happy that you touched on that as well.
Perfect. And I agree. I think like it's amazing that we have these new pillars, you know, coming in for comics. Oh, nice. Thank you, Danny.
You got a lot of fans in here, man. Everyone's all these guys are like, yeah, let's go, Chad.
Oh, that's awesome, man. I'm really happy to hear that. And yeah, and I guess like the other ones, you know, just really want to point out the grails, right? So partner statue. So, you know, you look at Mickey and Walt as an example. I know it's 12K now, but I mean, if anybody's trying to make an investment into this piece, you've got Mickey Mouse, the second most popular fictional character of all time, with Walt Disney, who's one of the most influential figures of all time, together in the same statue. And, you know, like, even though it's 4,333 editions, we don't know the type of utility coming. I mean, they kind of teased us with that little subscription to their Disney Plus, but I mean, who knows if that's entry to theme parks in the future, discounts to their stores. So these are the types of things that are completely speculative. But if you do your homework and you want to take that chance, it could be a really good calculated risk. And then, you know, the other ones I'll just talk about quickly. Superman, obviously, I think is another big one, most popular fictional character in the world. And then the other two is that we don't know of yet. So we always try to make references to the physical world, and we say, well, if this was important in the physical world, this should be important in the digital. But one thing we do not know is that sometimes the digital world could do something of its own. So as an example, if you buy into Spider-Man, right? There's the first appearance of Spider-Man in a digital collectible, and then the first appearance of Spider-Man in a comic book format in Amazing Fantasy 15. So the value might be dispersed into both. But if you have a new digital collectible on its own that comes to Ecomi, nobody knows what it is yet, but people make it important, similar to how they made Bored Apes important and how they made CryptoPunks important. There could be some things currently on this app that could explode. So that's why some of those decon items, as much as I'm not necessarily invested into a ton of stuff because they're not, you know, big blue chips, some of those things could be totally adopted by people like Steve Aoki, big people coming into the space. And those gold apes, you know, maybe it's the secret rare Bored Ape Club or whatever. Like, there's so many things that could come from this. I know there's like the Cat Fat Bronson as an example. So many different speculative things. And so that's why I also think it's important just to have some play money in those ones too, just to diversify in case anything ever takes off.
I'm really happy you said that, because I think very similar about that. And I've accumulated some of the decon ones like after the fact, because I got, you know, I think like 2 or 3 during decon while I was there, like on the drops. But I was able to pick up some like during that slight dip that we had before Immutable, which I'm sure everything's mooning now.
Yeah.
In here.
But hey, sorry, dude. I feel so.
No, you're good. This is more valuable for me. Everyone you can listen and get in the marketplace and you know, jam for whatever you want. But one thing that you just brought up is like the popularity of these artists, also not just in Veve, but also into the NFT world, right? Like Tristan Eaton he just announced that he's dropping a 10K project. I think it's coming out in the next couple of days. And it's actually with Mitch from Mondo, I believe, as well. Wow. And I really wanted to see if I could get them on, but I'm not sure if I'm gonna have enough time to kind of discuss the project. But things like that, like that's broader to the NFT world outside of Veve, right? So more people come aware of these artists who are doing big things in the NFT world, like Kazik and Jermaine Rogers and Ron English. But that's going to bring further value into Veve as well. So good points. But here's the piece that, I mean, hopefully people won't get mad, but what would you say, on your opinion, are overvalued right now, top 5?
Yeah, so the way that I look at overvalued pieces is I always try to imagine it as a one of one. So as an example, if you think about a one of one Superman that's, you know, minted by DC and it's like the only one in existence, you know, in my opinion, that could fetch, you know, $10 to $15 million. Now, if you look at some of these other project artists that we currently have in here that are minting one of ones on the blockchain already for like 3 to 8 ETH, why would then people want to go invest, you know, 2 ETH into something that has 8,000 editions as an example? So there's just something to speculate about and to think about. Now, when it comes to overvalued, I'd say that Donnie would be one of those ones that, you know, it's a massive risk that you would take because you would buy in at $100,000 and there's so many more new scarce items that are dropping, you know, almost weekly, right? Like 250 edition comics almost weekly now, or every 2 weeks. And there's going to be many more scarce collectibles that might even rival that scarcity in the future of Donnie, right? So, and that's why it's a big risk, because all of a sudden now if you have something, you know, we saw the James Bond NFTs, another thing that I would say is completely overvalued because, again, super cool. I mean, it's really historical, but, you know, would you rather put $300,000 into all these grails that we talked about? You'd likely 5x your money in a year. As
you're talking about the golden ticket specifically on James Bond, right?
That's correct. Yeah, the golden ticket specifically. Yeah, thanks for specifying, Taps. Yeah, just because there's only 7 editions and the buy-in for that is like, you know, $300,000, right? So I think that's an important thing to think about. And, you know, reverting back to comic books, if anybody's gone to a comic book shop, a good example is when you look at all the things in a comic book shop, most of the stuff is worth $2 to $5, and it's on all these bins. And so, you know, Veve's got one of those, I think it's Uncanny X-Men number 308. You know, you could buy that comic at a comic book store for $5 in pristine condition, raw. And, you know, you look at the common going for like $11 on Veve. And now you got to think, when there's over 1,000 comics coming in to Veve eventually, you know, would that one still hold that type of value? Or would people say, no, there's another 25 grails, 150 key books. And so that's going to shift. Now, the biggest thing is that you got to think about the moving Veve ecosystem. It was smaller when I started. It's getting bigger. It's getting bigger. And so you got to constantly think about that analysis as, okay, if we drop now designer clothing, how does that still make all these other things stand out? Or is that now a new standout? You know, when we have Veveverse land and everybody's taking money out to buy homes, you know, what is that going to do to some of these prices of the collectibles as well? So I think it's important to stay nimble and to continuously assess what those grail pieces are. Now, the thing that I also want to talk about is just the Master Collector program. They might have some unbelievable things for people that, you know, exclusive drops and some things that I wouldn't even know yet. And so that's not a for you to go and say, I'm going to sell off my collection because I want these grail pieces. I mean, you know, you might actually receive some benefits that people like myself don't even get because you're a master collector or because you have a really good array of collectibles across the board.
And if I could caveat that too, like the first airdrop that we saw was a decision from Ron English to do so, right? Like they said that during the AMA that was Ron who wanted to do that, and then they made that happen, right? So that's the piece that I'm always worried about. Like I could flip, you know, something like a you know, a Givenchy or a Todd or something, but what happens then if they decide, oh, we're going to do an airdrop for all those who are still holding, you know, season 1 or seasons 1 through 4 of black and white Batman, right? Like this little things that can change at the drop of a hat, and you're like, I had it, right? Like then you miss out on something that's going to be thousands of dollars, like what we saw with the gold rabbit that he was airdropped.
That's such a good point, Taps. And, you know, I feel like they will do that because they're going to incentivize people, right? And and like you said, I mean, think about people that held that serial killer set, all of a sudden had a 6K, you know, collectible delivered to them. And I mean, you know, you could take 3 months to start flipping and only make 6K. So, you know, that's some of the benefits that are on the way. So that's why I think it's going to be interesting. People are going to have their different strategies and nobody can tell you what's right for you. And, you know, we also forget that there's a lot of people that are in this just to collect. There's emotional investments. These are people that just want to, you know, cast their Star Wars NFTs in AR daily and enjoy those. And so, you know, that's the part of it as well, is like investors are a part of it, but, you know, there's so much more to it than just that. And that's what I think why this platform is going to take over the world, is because it's playing on heartstrings, it's playing on financial strings. You know, it's playing on technological advancement with all the amazing augmented reality. There's utility. So there's so many different factors driving people into this platform.
Absolutely. And then I think that was like 3 or 4. Was there any other ones you think are kind of overvalued? And everyone, you know, we have a few questions to get through still, and I'll be answering a few that are in the chat as well, because I'm sure some people want to, you know, get some of their questions answered with you as well. And but I definitely want to make sure that I get through some of these, because took some time to you know, get this chance to pick your brain. Well, everyone can kind of understand some of your logic around it, but what are some of those other ones that you think are overvalued?
Yeah, so I think the other ones are like right now, for instance, if you look at like a golden Moogly, okay? So I mean, I was a person that got a golden Moogly back in the day because I made a mistake. Back in the day, I never thought
mistakes. What?
Yeah.
Flipping isn't 100% going to work all the time.
Yeah. Well, and I think the hard part, right, Taps, was back in the day when we were having such limited collectibles, we thought that in the future, you will never see something less than 1,000 editions being dropped. So that's what my thinking was, man, if I get this will always be the rarest or one of the second rarest, third rarest item on the app ever. And what I realized is that once those comics started dropping with 250 editions, I'm like, wait a second, like there's only 100 edition difference here between the two. And, you know, again, maybe Ghostbusters is a good IP still compared to like, you know, just some kind of unpopular comic book. But then again, you know, scarcity to me was one of the biggest drivers for that. So I generally look at scarcity and hype, if it's not popular, as a short-term play to then flip into things that are very, you know, popular, scarce, and could have great utility. So that's kind of where my head goes. And again, that's not anything to Golden Moogly holders. I mean, that thing could go to, you know, whatever, 40K overnight. But I think that's just an important point to bring up. And I think another one too is just like some of these artworks and posters. You know, we keep saying, oh, this is the first time it's this person, and this is the first time it's that person. You know, eventually there's going to be thousands of artists in here. And so at that point, it's not going to matter as much, right? Again, back to the relative ecosystem, when Simon Legno joined, it was a big deal because he was the first artist. But now we've got all these other artists, we've got Decom, we've got all these other things. People forget about those things that are not as important. And you know, they might only remember the top 10 to 15 things when you zoom out. And the further that we zoom out and more stuff comes in, it's the same principle that applies. And that's why no one will ever forget things like the first ever NFT on Veve, because it's such a huge thing to say.
No, that's a really good point. And it's also like Simone was big because we were there then, but for newer users, they see like Mermicornos and Unicornos and they're like, why is this, you know, this high? But it's because they're newer to it, right? So, yeah. But it is interesting because it could, like what we were touching on earlier, flip back around, right? As we see another drop from Simone, which is most likely going to happen, or we'll see like these NFT artists branch out into other NFTs, and then that will bring more value to those NFTs that are in Veve. So I think the way Veve did it was really smart because it they started so many different NFTs and brands here that when they actually do, whether it's like an exclusive license, which it sounds like Disney and Marvel might be, but there's some that probably aren't, right? Like what you saw the DeLorean with Flare Network and some others, but good in a long period of time, because if we're the first and then it drops in those, it'll bring more awareness to Veve because they want the premium collectibles, which they're not always premium on other NFT projects, right? So it's kind of like a two-edged sword in a way.
Man, that's such a key point that you bring up, because all that it's doing is exasperating the importance of these first ones when other stuff is dropped on other platforms. And like the same thing that we see in this platform, right? Like you look at FA Harley Quinn, all of a sudden, you know, we're seeing like the third and fourth set now of Harley Quinn being released. And I mean, in the future, that could be the 21st, 22nd set. And so people alone on this platform are going to go back to that FA Harley Quinn and be like, wow, that was the first one. And that hit the blockchain first, and, you know, all those different things. So, and then like you said, Taps, like if all these other platforms are coming out with the same stuff we have second or third, I mean, again, I think that all that does is draw back value to Veve and really say, this is why we're going to stand the test of time, you know? So I think I don't mind having competitors in the space because it's drawing more people in, and then they're flocking to what's most important.
Yeah, I think you're the reason I ended up buying a first appearance black and white penguin from your video way back when. I was like, oh, he's right. This is the first time penguins are going to be here, right? And so like little things like that. And like, I think they're still way up from when I bought it. So it's interesting to see. But one thing that you did touch on a little back was you said, like, you know, the market will the value of collectibles will kind of move up and down as we've seen, but there's definitely ways where we see like a new tier and then it kind of moves up from where and it never goes back down on some of the collectibles. But I'm curious, you know, Immutable X just dropped that amazing promo video. We see OMI that's moving. We see like the collectibles, I'm sure in the marketplace are going up, but what are your thoughts on the value of collectibles forward looking? I'm saying like a year out, 2 years out, since, you know, we're just about done with the Immutable X or it sounds like we're almost done. In other words, like what will be the effect, you know, with Immutable X in your eyes?
So for me, this is massive. I mean, this was a dream come true from day one. All the FUD about these not being real NFTs, now seeing that we're, you know, have traceable data that we have, you know, that's living on IMX, that people can now, there's nothing they can say now. I mean, obviously there's still a few things like the cash out, but that's coming. And so now when I see this stuff on IMX, right, to me, this allows these massive ETH investors to come in and, you know, to basically utilize their money for these licensed IPs that are some of the best in the world. And I think that, you know, we had CryptoPunks, we had the Bored Apes, and my gut tells me that the next wave is blue chip IPs. And we have not even seen the utility yet that, you know, is going to be dropped in the metaverses, in the Veveverse, you know, in just little things like, you know, what we saw in that OMI utility article, like renting your NFTs. So there's so many things now that are on the way. And to me, this is like absolutely monumental. So I think we could see some drastic increases, because we're doing the math the other day. We see Bored Apes going for 75 ETH, 150 ETH. And it's like, now you got the golden goose, Walt and Mickey from Disney, $320 billion industry. And that would be listed at 2 ETH if it was in the marketplace right now. And how does that make any sense? The only thing that I think was potentially be a deterrent is that people have to get used to the additions. They're not used to, a lot of people are used to seeing those one of ones on ETH, right? And on the different OpenSea and what have you. So now it's going to be like, what does this mean having all these additions? But I think with a brand like this, man, there's, I think you're fine. It's a safe bet.
You said so many gold pieces right there. I mean, that's kind of how I look at it in like the broader NFT market. Like the gold stat just said is like what, 2 ETH, or some are around 2 to 3 ETH. But when you compare it to things that are, blue chips of the NFT world, they're selling for 30 ETH, 60 ETH, right? Like,
right.
It's still so nuanced, because I definitely think we had that asterisk, like, are they real NFTs? Even though we have more utility and ability to use them than many, many other NFT projects. But I actually got into a really interesting debate with someone not too long ago who, like, I was actually, I think, at when I met Jeremiah O. Yang at this local NFT talk, and they're like, well, yeah, but there's not going to be another project that will be able to come up to the same value as like a Bored Ape. And I was like, I completely disagree, because it set the bar, and there's going to be more that are going to come achieve that. And the space is always evolving. And we actually just saw where Elio Trades and Alec Becker, they have the Neo Tokyo, like those actually, I think in terms of volume, flipped punked for a little bit and then dropped back down. So it's like, there's so much opportunity still in like we have what, 2.9, I think I checked today, 2.9 million NFTs, but there's going to be some learning around like FA, FE and all that. But now that they're actually being validated as collectibles, Immutable X brings a whole nother ball game that and if people need education on it, we're going to educate, like not just us, like people who are like, I don't get this. Like, let me sing you the song of my people, all however many there are of us. And so, yeah, I think the opportunity is golden now, but it's never ending, right? Like, we're going to keep growing and scaling.
Right. And I mean, what platform has the biggest, baddest blue chip IPs in the world? Like the fact that we have DC, Marvel, and Disney in one platform amongst all these other insanely valuable brands is just mind-boggling, right? And it's like, so how is, and this is, again, we're the first ones to do it. We're the first ones to hit the blockchain, a lot of this stuff. And so, and I mean, the premium digital format looks amazing. Like everything about it makes sense. So it's like, when you, and even the scarcity, they're used to, projects, you see it all the time, 10,000 editions, unique sheep that have different, things about them. And it's like, well, guess what? Now you have 1,000 editions of a Secret Rare Spider-Man. What is that worth to you, right? As an example. So,
yeah, I think we're on the same wavelength, because I posted that Dragon Ball Z thumbnail. I think we have to go ahead and like fusion right now. You got to like put your
here. Here's exactly.
Other way.
Oh, yes.
You're fusing with the duck. There it is. we're one brain.
There we go.
Homie.
Yeah, I like it. Perfect.
No, I mean, that I couldn't agree more with you. And like, I'm happy to, I mean, I think all of us kind of have similar mentalities, but it's kind of cool to just kind of, speak with someone who is also like, we're so early, and here's the tangible evidence of why. So great points. One question, and I have about 4 more questions, and we'll open up to everyone in the audience. And thanks everyone for being here. Hit that like button. Happy that everyone's in here, getting some alpha knowledge from Chad. But one question I did have for you, because I know you've shared it in a few videos and in conversation, but I believe you said in the past, and I'm not sure if this is still true, that you don't invest in OMI at all. Is that still true today?
Yeah, so I put in at the beginning, I put in just over 1 million OMI, and I never looked at it again. And then so I have OMI, but I don't think about it. I don't know enough about it like you, Taps, to get into the charts and the reading and this, so I was like, but I do know collecting.
And so my question then around that is, and I know we saw just like the version 0.1 and version 0.2 is going to be coming soon. They said in the AMA with some pretty substantial changes. But now that you've seen the OMI utility article and seeing how it vastly incentivizes you as a collector, does that not make you want to buy more OMI or see the value in adding more to your bags to make you a better collector and investor in the Veve Collectibles?
1000%. I mean, there's so much that it speaks to me about. I mean, little things like, potential of having like, OMI to NFT coming, the renting aspect, how you needed I think it was like a $10,000 buy-in, the exclusive collectibles being sent to you, the staking element, the renting piece is massive to me, right? So as a collector, like I think about the Veveverse and I think to myself, how do I create a business from NFT Pirates in the Veveverse? Well, I want the coolest, rarest things and I want to rent them out and I want to have dialogue about it. I want to talk about strategy from the early days, and again, I think the basic metaverse is when we start off, we're going to be more computer game like, meeting in a museum kind of thing. I don't think it's going to be completely virtual reality and what have you for a long time, but I mean, it will get there. But yeah, I mean, a massive incentives. And even now, like I'm, probably going to start dabbling back into it because I'm seeing that growth and I'm learning more from people like yourself and, Foster and Dan and all these other people, that are so knowledgeable on the subject. And, when you see the long-term potential, like even if this thing hits 30 cents, I mean, it's over, right? So pretty cool.
It's funny. Sorry. I'm listening to you, but also reading the comments and like, I'm like, oh, people are already sweeping the floors in the artist pieces. Like people are actively heeding the wise words of Chad, and I love it. But it's funny to see. And yeah, I mean, that's good to hear because that was, as like a crypto investor, when I saw the OUP article, I was kind of like, well, like I was hoping for staking that was going to actually like have APY, but at the same time, other exchanges can offer that, right? Like crypto can offer that and potentially Coinbase and other things. But like there were some pieces where I was like, I think there's ways to improve this. And I'm really happy that, I mean, they constantly take our community feedback and then apply it immediately, right? We just saw we're going to see the finalized version of the MCP and they dropped those updates. I think they're going to get rid of, they said, the ability to, or that you have to stake in order to use OMI in the marketplace, which that was like my biggest gripe. I was like, I think that needs to go away. So I think what the OUP article is going to be even stronger, the next version. And then we know that there's going to be like a finalized version that comes out after that. But, you kind of touched on the value and like the opportunity with, Immutable X move. But what do you think Ecomi and Veve's greatest weaknesses are coming out, being finally recognized to the NFT world? And I guess where's going to be some kind of growing pains there?
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing is there's a few things I want to touch on. So I think one of the big things is the collector's knowledge. So people might just be going into things that are limited, cool, scarce, and it might actually shock everyone. We'd be like, wait a second, this is the F.A. Todd. How do you why aren't you into that? And they're going into Darwin Cook Batman as an example because it's $100 compared to spending 4,000 because they're thinking Batman licensed by DC. Where's the cheapest bang for my buck? Not necessarily understand what we understand as Veve. So there's a lot of things that aren't guaranteed in terms of, you got to think about all these new users. So that's one thing. The second thing that I want to talk about is the additions. When people see things that are like 8,000 editions of a collectible that they're seeing is going for a one of one for like 20 ETH, they're going to be like, no, I want this one of one piece. I don't want to spend, like a fraction of that to get something that I'm sharing with 8,000 other people if it has the same kind of significance. And that's why I'm telling you the stuff that's really important, like Givenchy as an example, being the first ever commissioned Givenchy artwork, despite the edition size, that should still be very valuable because it's the first time that happened on that side of things. And so I think that's the second thing. The third thing is the interoperability is, like if we're still having Marvel, Disney, and all these big things on the app still, and it's not able to be taken off, I think a lot of people that get into cryptocurrency do it because of the decentralization aspect. And what this does is it's centralizing things. You could technically get your account banned if, you're scammed, which you should, but I'm just saying like, these are things that people are afraid of still and might take some time to get adopted. And I think the other big thing is like, even for me, if I had the ability, I would take my grails, put it in cold storage and never look at it back until we have the Veveverse. I might take that offline for 3 to 4 years, which I would love to do. So there's a lot of things like that I think are going to be some different road stops there for people. But I think the biggest incentive is the ETH opportunity is like, it's just huge. And so many people don't want to pay taxes to transfer that over to their bank, get fiat, put things on a credit card. When some people see me make these huge purchases, like, for 20 grand, it's not as if I took my line of credit and went like, let me charge it. I'm taking money that I've already made in the app that are gems, like play money. And so it doesn't feel real. And that's the same with these people that have like 600 ETH sitting there. So I do see that, but those are some of the roadblocks that I'm anticipating.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with those. And like, that's the piece, right? Like, we always speak about opportunity and value, but I think it's good to also see like, other people's views on potential weaknesses. But what's interesting is like every company has strengths and weaknesses, right? Like Apple has strengths and weaknesses, Tesla has strengths and weaknesses, right? So it's good to kind of recognize what those are, especially since we're going from like, let's say, this is our first year in Ecomi or Veve, and now it's going to be going to a whole nother phase now with this Immutable X move and really thoroughly joining the rest of the NFT world. So there's going to be some initial growing pains. And like you said, like actual trying to drop some collecting knowledge to those who may not have collectible or statue or comic knowledge. And so what's funny is like, it's a weakness, but it's also a strength, right? Like that's also going to build a lot of value towards many of these things. But I'm happy that you touched on those. And what do you think are the biggest catalysts that will shoot up things in value? I mean, besides Immutable X, what's going to really shoot up these collectibles the most in value?
So I think the biggest catalyst for me is the understanding of first appearance. I think if people actually understand the implications of that, then I think that could be like extremely monumental. So again, going back in the comic book world, right? First appearances of Batman, Superman, Spider-Man, etc., are like, that comic book that's in a decent grade is worth millions of dollars. And that was the first time it was ever happened in the physical world. Now we're transferring over to the digital one, which we expect to live forever. And so, Immutable is done. Yes. Yeah.
It's done.
And so I really see, that if people can understand, well, hey, this is really important because guess what? This is the Batman FA and it's the first time it's ever happened. Then I think, people will shoot the value of that up through the moon. And so I think, anything like that would really get people's knowledge. If they had the knowledge like that, they'd be really able to sift through some of the most valuable stuff. And I think, just looking again at the physical world, like I did collecting in Pokemon, I had some comic books, I collect watches, anything that's really rare, popular, and limited, it like tends to moonshot because people just want the best of the best usually, right? And so I think if you get some big ETH whales that are looking at that stuff and they're understanding the implications, and Gary Vee said it the other day, remember with Dan, he's like, well, the first ever, Spider-Man is huge. Well, now we're telling you, we had the first ever one. It's Marvel's first ever NFT, and here it is. So I think people are going to start realizing that.
100%. And like, I'm really happy that they said in the last AMA too that Marvel confirmed this is the first Marvel NFT, because however it works out with the blockchain being able to see the original mint date versus the Immutable X mint date, either way, it's still the first Marvel NFT. And if let's say like, they said there's some argument around like the AMC one, that's Sony, right? That isn't Marvel. So there's a big differentiator there. Yeah. But, and sorry, I totally had something I want to touch on that you said. Oh, I want to say, I think that the FA or like learning some of that is, a big catalyst. And I was going to like take some knowledge to push that out in the NFT community. And David, I think, said on the last AMA too, that he wants to create and I'm not sure if he was joking or what, but I hope he does this. I hope he actually creates, or Veve creates, almost like a tab in the app, or just like a Medium article where it's like, hey, NFT world, let's educate you on what first appearance, first edition is, con exclusive, because that way it's wider. Like it's not just us content creators trying to educate, but it's educating the rest. Like it is going to explode, and we'll see other digital collectible companies do the same thing most likely, because Veve's a trendsetter. And so I think if they did something like that, it would help educate. And I'm going to throw in I know I'm asking you questions, but I want to throw in my two pieces that I think are going to be the biggest, because the second one,
let's hear it. I'd love to hear it.
The two biggest catalysts that I think that are going to absolutely crush, I mean, like be monstrous for the app in terms of new users and just value of the collectibles. And the second one's going to lead in the last question, and we'll take some community questions. And the first is, and I've touched on it so much, but I need people to understand it. And that's localization, like the ability to have the app in multiple languages. So right now, if you don't speak and read English, which, you know, a lot do, it's cool. Like it looks like it, right? But it's so, you can't really navigate the app really thoroughly, so that we have so many community members who are like their second language is English, but they, you know, can read and speak it well. But there's so many markets that we're missing out on because we don't have that localization. And I think that's a strategic choice that they're doing, because I mean, if that was from the get-go, I mean, man, we'd probably be around like already 3 million active monthly. Yeah. So I think it's probably like a, hey, we need to grow this. And then once localization comes, we get anime, we get Pokemon, most likely, we get all of it, right? So that's the big number one catalyst that I'm like, when that happens, the roof is blown off this thing.
You know what, perhaps you're right, man. You're totally right. Like, to be honest, I wasn't even really thinking about that before. I've heard a few people, but like now that you say that, because I think about all the stuff that hasn't shot up, like Ultraman as an example. You know, if we have Japanese and Chinese as languages, I mean, who knows where that's going to be at? So it goes to show you how early we are, even though it doesn't feel like it. It's still so early, right? And I think that's two amazing points you bring up. So yeah, big kudos on that.
Yep. And then the second piece, which is going to lead into the last question, is obviously the Veveverse. Like we've talked about it, you know, a ton, but it's because we are so excited for it and because we're in the know. But when you look at like top NFT projects, I've only seen, I think, 1 or 2, you know, forums that actually have listed Ecomi or Veve in it. But most, when you align, like even on CoinMarketCap and all that, you don't see OMI is listed as a tie to a Metaverse project, right? So most of the world is sleeping on the fact that the Veveverse is going to be so influential in the Metaverse world, especially because we have all these big brands. So the fact that most of the world does not know what the Veveverse is, we haven't even seen what it fully looks like yet, or understanding of what's going to happen with the big brands and our collectibles going in, or community size, I think is vastly going to shoot the app up in terms of growth.
Totally agree. I mean, that's such a good point too. And I mean, you know, I'll be personally investing as much as I can afford into Veveverse land, because, you know, I think my buddy always says that to me. He's like, you know, dirt is what sells, and you know, it's proven itself in the real world. And
land is king.
Land is king, man. Yeah.
But that's the last question, man, which is, and then we'll take community questions, but what are your thoughts, like big picture Veveverse? What do you think it's going to be, its effect, and its weight in the wider Metaverse world?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think the number one thing that I look at is it will be the biggest, baddest blue chip kind of piece for all the interoperability. So I see it as being that mega base, you know, for anything that's like super substantial and has a lot of weight. So for instance, you know, if you think about the Veveverse, maybe we have a portal that goes to Disney World, that goes to, you know, Nike, that goes to all these different things. And people are also coming into our land, you know, to basically rent out different collectibles for their parties in Nike, or they're renting out their Disney and Walt statues to go back in the Disney theme park over in their side of things. And so, you know, it could be this massive opportunity that people aren't even considering yet. And I think a lot of people are focused on Sandbox and all these other projects, but can't really understand what the implications are for this. You know, think about people right now collecting comic books with comic book stores, or, you know, going after all the cars, like the DeLoreans as an example, or all these new cars coming in. Can you have a transportation shop that you set up, right, for virtual reality, or for cars that you want to put in front of your homes? So, I mean, the amount of things that are coming to me, and I really think in terms of like big events, you know, concerts, those kind of things, that will be one of the number one sources for that reason. So I think that's kind of where my head goes.
Yep. Very, very similar thinking. I mean, I can't wait for it. And like that first land grab is going to be insane, of course. And it does sound like it's going to be like, if you're an avid collector, depending on your ranking, like it's definitely going to have an effect once that does come. But that's a whole nother element too, right? Like, because right now, literally like for months now, every single drop sells out in a second. It doesn't matter what it is, right? Like they could drop pet rocks and we'd be like, I want that rock, man. And it would sell out in a second. They could do, you know, 10,000 editions, it'll sell out. But that's going to be a whole nother element, right? Because then there's going to be land drops. There'll be different worlds and different areas that you could buy. And I think it's going to start off with like the home world, but then it's going to branch out, buy land. And then there's going to be different areas. Like if you don't think man, I'm already, my head's already getting going, right? Like maybe at that point, like if they were to do like a virtual VV versus Disneyland, maybe you get first priority if you still hold all the golden moments, like even though it's that far out, right? Like you never know how it could go, because what they always say, they said VV is a collector's app first, right? So they tend to reward the collecting mindset.
Right. That's a beautiful point, because, there's incentives to hold on to things like that. And I think being the first of so many things with these huge brands, they're just going to want to incentivize those people to hold it, and, even more, to make these things more valuable than ever. And I still find it unbelievable that, Vivi is this platform that has all this stuff come in so early on Taps. Like when they announced Disney, I didn't believe it at first. I was like, is this
I was like, wait, what? No, this is too early. What?
Yeah, is this really happening? And so, like, despite where, let's just say, OMI is right now, and despite what some of these collectibles are worth, I mean, if you're convicted, which you and I have been since back in the early days, and I mean, we've seen the growth, that it's not that hard to imagine another 10x from here, another 20x from here of users, collectibles, value, all that stuff, right? So I'm super bullish, man, on the future.
Yeah, I love it. And so I've always I get a little guff when I have too long of streams, but it's funny because like when I have you guys on, like we could talk for another 2 hours, but I'm trying to be a little more concise. But I definitely wanted to focus on some of these questions. But let's see, folks in the community, let's see what are some questions you have for chat. I mean, we've got them for a little bit here, so I want to make sure that we can answer a couple of community questions, keep it almost like AMA style.
Cool.
Let's see. Let me see if I can take a look at some of these. I see people talking about Deadpool. I'm so stoked for that drop, man.
Oh, dude, it's going to be amazing. I'm excited. And there's going to be like a little cult of people that love this. We talked about that in our Twitter chat today, right? Like
Deadpool cool. Pump group. It's already in the making.
100%.
Let's see. This looks like a question. So this Viviverse is just going to be a game with some social attributes and the NFTs in it, but it has to be done by some proper developer. I don't believe this team has the skills to deliver. I mean, I can kind of address that. So the Viviverse is going to be its own metaverse, and they actually had they got the original what's it called? Am I blanking on the name? They signed the original patent for the name Viviverse back, I think, at the beginning of 2020. So they've been talking about and focused on metaverses well before all of your favorite crypto projects have been talking about metaverses, or well before Facebook changed their name to Meta, but obviously had like their Horizon and all that. But so they've been thinking about this and slowly building it over time. And they are a lean company, but at the same time, they do outsource. So if you don't think that they're not doing plenty behind the scenes, which they've already revealed that they've had licenses for over a year. They had Marvel for, I think, like 18 months, something like that. They had Disney for quite some time. Then you're mistaken, because there might be 30, 35 people to Vivi and Ecomi company-wise, but that doesn't mean that they're not working with the biggest developing companies right now, making this come to happen, and what's going to make it a fine-tuned product for us once the Viviverse comes.
Yeah, great point.
Let's see.
Everybody's asking where my brother's at, it looks like, hey? It's so funny.
Yeah, where's your brother at?
Yeah, he went away to university for soccer. So he's trying to be a professional athlete. And so that's...
what does he play?
He'll be back soon enough. I think I want to do a live with him soon.
Yeah, I liked the early days. Well, I mean, I like the current days, but the early days of NFT Pirates, when it was like you and your brother, like you guys were like both like leaning up against the wall, like, hey, bro, like here's my value props, and then you'd be like, yeah, this is mine, blah blah. Like, yeah, I like the two-head approach.
Yeah, it was fun, man. I do miss the guy, So he's welcome back anytime.
Love it. Let's see. What do you think the first Batman collection will be worth in the future? Oh yeah. How about caveat that? So first, I guess season 1, black and white Batman set, and then what do you think the price of your favorite Todd will be at? Yeah.
So there's a lot of things that I think about here. I mean, the first thing is that there's already been sub 100s of this set, like with matching serial numbers that have sold over 100,000, right? Easily. So it's already past 100,000. If you want to look at it that way, it depends on the mint numbers. But if you're talking a floor, I think eventually it'll hit at least 100,000. But I think it's going to take a while before that comes. I mean, it could be 5 to 6 years. But I do see it like once again, we scale out and we're looking way back in time. I think we could look back, because if you do the math, like look at the first ever CryptoPunks as an example, right? Or the first ever Bored Apes. This stuff tends to matter, but it's a patience game. A lot of people in crypto, you get used to, well, it's been 3 months, it's only gone up 20x. I mean, what's happening, right? So, but if you think Todd's already at whatever is that now, 4.5K, to think it hits 25K and Rizzo hits 25K isn't really that much of a huge stretch in my opinion. But I think, if you really want to see that value, I think if you go low mints or special mints, so for instance, like the 1939 Todd Batman might already sell now for at least $100,000, right? So just things like that.
No, that's a really good point. And that's what's funny too, is like, for me, I've been a collector my whole life, but I collected what I wanted, right? So like I collected Pokemon cards and Magic cards and tons of collectibles and stuff like that. But I never really understood like first appearance or first edition, all that. So like for a long time, like I was lucky enough that I started in Veve in February and there was things all for sale, but I was still kind of like hesitant about it. But the first thing I bought was a Riso. So I held on to it.
Amazing.
It was so hard to understand because it was a low mint. It was the first Batman. I was like dead set, like this has to be the most, and I still think it is undervalued in my opinion, but this has to be the most valuable collectible because it's the first ultra rare. So I didn't get a Todd for a long time because I just couldn't equate that in my mind. And then I ended up getting one, I think when it was like $100, which, hey, I'm still way up. But it's kind of, it takes some learning lesson, not just for us, the community, but also the bigger world. And I think this ties into GTA's question, which I mentioned before, but shouldn't Veve Collectibles have a new category of FA 3D interactive collectible at minimum, since they basically created a new way of collecting them? Let's push the agenda. What do you FA 3D, what do you think of that? Interactive.
Yeah, so I think that's gonna, I like the idea of, doing that, but the problem is then you're gonna say, okay, now we have FA gamification of this collectible, FA board game of this collectible, and then also now you got like 26 FAs, which would then diminish the importance of that FA. I think it would just disperse the value. So again, Taps, we talked about that changing ecosystem. If this stuff does start to happen, that's when you got to start reassessing what that FA of digital versus 3D interactive means if they were to do that. So I think it's an important point.
Awesome. Very good point. And that does make sense. Does Chad think it's better to collect multiple pieces from the floor for low mint, sub 100 mints?
Yeah. So, sub 100 mints tend to go for a lot more money. And the reason that I want to bring this up is because of this. Let's say you look at a collectible that has 1750 editions, okay, and it's a really popular collectible. Let's just say like a Rizzo. Forever, for all of time, there'll only be 60 people in the world that will be able to get a sub 100 Rizzo. Now, that is what creates almost an exclusive category in its own, is because now you're saying, yeah, I'm one of 60 holders of a sub 100 Rizzo in the world. And if you have multiples, then you even diminish that quantity even more, right? Actually, sorry, Rizzo, there would be more than that, because there would be 84 holders, because the Veve took the first 16 back in the day. So
I was about to say that, like, not everyone knows that it wasn't always the first 40 on the early sets.
So I think that's the reason why. And so, like, when you get people like Lewis, let's say, if you get another 60 people like Lewis, that's a different type of game they want to play. They're going to be looking for that exclusive rarity. And so I think, it could really matter for a lot of people. And I've just seen from flips that anytime I get a sub 100, I'm at least getting 2 to 3x the floor. So I think, just in terms of if you have the opportunity for a good price, I think it's a good buy relative to the ecosystem now.
Awesome. Let's see. I had my finger on one that I thought was pretty good. Where was it? What IPs could Veve sign that would attract boomers to the scene?
Oh, interesting. Yeah, so even though our target audience is kind of young ETH whales right now looking at Pokemon, what could do the opposite? I think there's a lot of boomers that are hesitant to get into the NFT space and that really don't want to be a part of it. I talk to a lot of physical comic book collectors and they think it's a threat to their business. And so I think, it more to me would be education to bridge the gap. Not necessarily like a certain IP, because I think there's already some great IPs for them currently.
I agree. And So my buddy who got into it, I think about a month ago, he over Thanksgiving was like showing his dad and all that. And his dad that day went on and bought different collectibles, like I think a Batman and all that, because he could relate to it. But I like what they just touched on the AMA about cars. That speaks to all, generations, right? And like, especially like, I think a lot of the older, like if they go with like some classic cars or like Harley Davidson or things that have been around for quite some time, I think that brings in some of the boomers too, or like boomers, I guess like the older generation, into the app. And like, that's what they kind of round out, right? Because we see the value for, I guess, that 14 to roughly, I mean, there's people who are, I met people at Decon, they're like in their 50s or early 60s and like they love it. But the wider, I guess, generation audience is definitely something that they can really target in different waves. But and then the opposite way, where it's like we haven't really seen a ton that speaks to just kids yet. We saw the LL surprise dolls, but they haven't launched yet. So it's kind of both ways. And I think it was Kid Vivi who hopped on during the AMA and said like, hey, like, what if you had like a parental control kind of thing? And I thought that was brilliant. Like, I think there's a way that they could build in some kind of ability for kids to play with it, where and like sell the collectible and spend all their parents' gems and things like that.
Yeah, I mean that's a great point, because that'd be pretty scary seeing your kid, with a $25,000 NFT just fooling around.
Yeah. What do you mean you sold my wall? What do you mean? Yeah, we're giving you away.
That's hilarious.
Let's see. Do you consider never before seen collectibles, not just physical collectibles, made digital? I'm trying to decipher that.
Yeah. Do you consider?
I think like first created, like kind of like the Marvel Mighties, like
I think that's huge. I mean, and that's kind of what we went on to say earlier, is like there's new superheroes, there's new things that could emerge from the digital space. That even Vivi could create, as an example. That would be like a non-IP thing in the future, that might have a lot of value. So for sure, and again, the familiarity aspect comes in with a lot of these big IPs. But I mean, look at People as an example, a huge artist selling things for like 60 million bucks. So anything's possible for sure.
All right. I mean, I think this surprisingly pops up all the time, but what's your price prediction on OMI? I know you don't like heavily invest in OMI, but to get your take on it.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I thought it would be at least at 5 cents by now. From where I, because back in the day when it was, I think, I remember that run up from 0.0027 to like 0.001 or 0.016 or something. And I was like, we're for sure gonna hit 2 cents, like even if it dips. So I would like to see it go to like 30 cents is kind of where I would feel comfortable pulling out. And I don't know how long that's gonna take. I'm not really thinking about it too much, but I think 30 cents would be my like goal for OMI, even though I know there's the dollar club and everything, but I'd be happy with that.
Yeah, I mean, that's the funny thing. None of us expected as many drawbacks or things just to not happen. Like tons, it was like nothing's happened. I'm like, man, tons have happened with Vivi and Ecomi, the company. But in terms of the catalysts that were needed to have OMI's price be affected, like I go back and look at when I built a roadmap. I think I've done it more than once, but I looked at the roadmap and I'm like, 85% of that has not yet happened. And it was like, it's like, yeah, the price has fluctuated. But what was cool actually to see is, I mean, we saw the price shoot up in value today based on the Immutable move, but it's crazy because we've seen, because of all the financial kind of, everyone kind of being afraid with the FOMC meeting, all that happening, like the wider financial markets,
right.
The prices of stocks have been tanking. And then the prices of crypto have also been tanking, but Ecomi or OMI has been kind of just chilling. And then today we saw it jump up like 24, 28%, something like that. So in a market, what's like, that's what speaks to me is now you have a lot of long hodlers who have a majority of the coin. And it's almost not, I don't want to use this word because everyone tries to use it, but not completely, but somewhat looking like a little bit of decoupling or decoupled from Bitcoin and other crypto, right? Like we're seeing where the catalysts are moving the price of the coin, which is what I've always said will happen. So it is hard to see it not at an all-time high, but I completely agree. It's like we thought it'd be much higher, and I think this is I think this is a really good question for you. Any good videos or tips on someone young like myself, 22, trying to learn more about Vivi, especially being stages a way of making money short and long term?
Yeah. So there's a few videos that I like that are on my channel, even that I put out even like 7 months ago. It was like just like basic collecting knowledge on some of this stuff that, you know, luckily still has good implications. That's it. Yeah, exactly. Nice. Yeah. So there's that video.
I'm ready.
Yeah. And there's a few videos like that in there that, you know, first importance of first appearance, all that stuff. I think, you know, all the YouTube channels that, you know, Taps discusses, you know, for instance, like all the comic ways, sleep in comics, you know, comics and crypto, the Gale, you know, there's so many that I can go through, but all these different channels, all kind of specialize in different areas. So I'd say, you know, watching YouTube content would be a good thing for you right now. And then, you know, showing up for those drops, getting lucky on the drops, and then really, you know, scaling slowly. And just because you're seeing some of the people now like making $30,000 moves, $50,000 moves, you know, it's not to say that that's not possible for you in the future too, if you just slowly scale. So I think don't be discouraged, and, you know, try to build leverage. And yeah, maybe I can, you know, just and also just reach out to on Twitter for anything. Anybody that's here, I could, you know, share some different stuff there too.
And that's a good point. So just so everyone knows, if you're not familiar with NFT Pirates, you know, you can find him on Twitter. You can find him on YouTube. Both his links are in the details of this video. And just want to throw that out, and then we'll take a few more questions, and then we'll wrap up. But I think this is a good question. Matt G asks, how long do you think it will take to sell more than one thing at once? And so I think what he's referring to is the fact that Immutable X, you have access to ERC 1155, so the ability to batch sell, right? So you'll be able to sell a set and not just one thing at a time. And he's asking, I guess, when do you or how long do you think it'll be until we can do so?
So I think it'll be a little bit of time, and I would still say hold off, because one thing that collectors love is matching serial numbers for a set. So once they have that feature where you can actually identify who has other serial numbers that you're looking to collect, you might be able to message them and do a trade offer. So for instance, like give them a lower mint for, you know, your 313 mint, and give them a 226 as an example. And they're also, now when you sell that set or you put it as a matching set, that might actually increase in value. So there's some really cool things that we're not even thinking about yet that I think are on the way and would really appeal to collectors.
What do you think Walt's price prediction will be? You threw down on Todd. How about Walt?
Yeah, I mean, Walt, to me, I mean, long term, I see that. I think if it has good utility, and for instance, it gets you like Disney passes or something like that, I mean, that to me is at least a $50,000 collectible. If not 100K long term, I think it really will stand the test of time. And I think being the first Disney NFT, being again, some of the most iconic characters in history, all wrapped up in gold at a pretty good edition size for a $320 billion industry. I don't know how it's not going to get there. Not financially.
Let's see. Hey, Taps, question for you. What's your price prediction on OMI in the next 2 or 3 years? So, I mean, I've touched on this, and it's funny because I probably shouldn't even do short term anymore, right? Like, unless something actually happens, the catalyst that we need, it's just kind of stays stagnant. But I've spoken people who are saying, like, I don't see us hitting $1 for a long, long time. And then, like I said, like, I think 2028 or something, 2028. And then what happened was I started crunching numbers and looking at how much OMI we're burning currently, and then how much we can potentially burn based on OMI utility, and then based on the Veveverse, and based on more IP and all that. And when I kind of started looking at the fact that our actual circulating supply, or how much OMI we'll have left over the next probably 2 to 3 years, we'll only have like 1/3 or maybe like 1/4 left. And what happens with a lot of crypto is it goes into supply shock, right? And that's what actually has the price go way, way up. And so that's what actually changed my mind to think, okay, it's possible that sometime around either maybe right before or during 2025, $1 is entirely possible. And I know it's hard right now, and you're like, well, we're still not even back at 1 cent. I mean, that's the thing, is in the long scheme of things, you put how much is a million OMI today? It's probably like
10 to 11,000 or something.
Yeah, 10 grand. So if you put 10 grand and let it sit, didn't look at it for 3 years, and then you can then see in 3 years you turn 10 grand into $1 million. You know how hard that is to do in any other financial vehicle than crypto, especially like one that you're collecting and doing things all on the side. And that's just $10,000, and not financial advice, but like that has a lot of power to it. The hardest part with Ecomi and Veve is finding the patience and the wherewithal to just kind of have your investment, believe in it, and let it sit. Because I've lost out on many gains on other crypto, whether I was moving around, as well as stocks too, right? Like it just something happens overnight, and all of a sudden, boom, and then it never looks back.
Right. Well, I'm glad you're here for that question, Taps. that's why I watch your videos all the time, so I can learn more about the token.
All right, we'll take two more. Do you think there's any Veve comics or collectibles that have peaked completely? That's a good question.
Yeah.
I.e., that they won't go up once you can sell on open market.
Yeah, I mean, I think there definitely is. You know, I'm not sure exactly like which ones that would be, but I'll give you an example. Like Comics and Crypto did a good one, a really good market breakdown of the physical market value of a comic and then the digital market value. And I think it was Con or something, or Avengers #8, that actually has a higher digital market value than its physical counterpart. And so, you know, one thing to consider there is that when we get more grails, and, you know, and just for everybody knows, that went up to $60,000 at one point, right? Now, although it's 250 editions, you know, we might have another, like a lot of other 250 edition things that are very, very important. And that might even be more important than that, because again, there's thousands, if not tens of thousands of comics. So I think it's just important to look at those kind of situations and know what's peaked. And so, yeah, that would be like one of, you know, the examples I would share. But I definitely think there's things that may have peaked. And just to give you an example, like, you know, going back to Nightwing, right? Perfect example. People were paying $1,300 then, and then now it's still worth around the same. You know, it might have been up today a little bit, but now Todd's gone exponential. So it's really important to, you know, think about the long-term potential of each one of them.
Good point. That's, yeah. Taps, are you invested in IMX? I am. I actually bought it when it was before it shot up, and then I think it's actually back down quite a bit. I mean, are you invested in Immutable X yet, the actual token, Chad?
I'm not yet, man. No, I should though.
I've been thinking about doing a video on it. Like, it's tied to Veve, right? So when you look at a layer 2 solution that has a fast growing ecosystem with some of the most prominent gaming and collectible like NFT platforms out there, and you look at how fast it's grown over the past 6 months, and its NFT projects are doing really well, I mean, it kind of just makes sense. And then what's happening right now? Like, they have a number of 10K projects in it, but they're implementing a very, very large name, Veve, I'm not sure if you guys have heard of it, onto their platform, which has how many NFTs? 2.9 million. Right. So what do you think it's going to do to the price and awareness of Immutable X? Do you not think that they're going to also capitalize on Veve's fame towards their platform? And that also brings opportunity for them based on it. Like, everything's a web effect. It's a ripple effect, right? So now that they have that launch of Veve, it's going to bring awareness to them. And they also have not just awareness from us as investors, but also larger companies that are already invested, like brands invested into Veve. So I right when I saw Immutable X, like I think I got for like $3.50. I couldn't get an ICO because America sucks like that. But I did buy into it when it was low, and will continue to add over the next year or two.
Sweet. I'm going to join you after that description there. That was an amazing. Yeah.
I might be doing a video on it. I probably should. Like, I've been like I need to find the time, because I have all these ideas. I'm like, oh, let's make for a great video. And then I get busy doing other stuff or talking to the community. All right. Last question, because I know I've kept you for quite some time.
Oh, that's great.
Crypto Chris, shout out to Chris. Make sure you guys follow Crypto Chris and subscribe to his channel as well. Great content creator himself. How long does it take you to sell low mints, Chad? I'm not a low mint collector myself. Are you trying to buy some from Chad?
Yeah, Chris, congrats on 3K subs today, dude. I think I saw your post, so that's awesome. Yeah, man. I mean, you know, one thing I've noticed about low mints is that it's really got to stick out. So if you're like just beating the competition, like if you're looking at like a board of low mints, let's just say sub 150, and you're like, oh, I'm going to price it a few $100s lower than, you know, the guy before me or whatever, it's got to be something where because the person buying it knows they need to make money now from your flip. So they have to see a substantial increase that they can make from it. And if they're willing to put the time into it, or think there's going to be a run up in that collectible, then they'll go and buy it. So like I'll give you an example. Like when I sold my 122 Walt, I think the 167 wallet was 19K and my 122 was 24. And then there was another one, a 131 that was like 30 or something K. So I was like, okay, I've got to actually be somewhere in the middle here because if I go 29, it's not getting bought. So This is an example.
Awesome point. Actually, we'll take one more because I think it's a good question. Maxim asks, do you know what will make some NFTs sellable on OpenSea while others not? Is that, I guess, up to the license?
Yeah, I think, so from what I'm seeing is that there's probably a lot more paperwork and discussions and complexities with bigger licenses. I'm kind of unaware of what those conversations would be, but living off platform and stuff. So I think, things that are already on, like artists that are already on the blockchain, already doing stuff, I think the transition would be very quick for them because they're used to that. And we're still, it's still unforeseen. I mean, they could come and be like, guess what? Disney's on Immutable. I mean, I can't tell you it's not going to be, but if it was, it'd be insane. But I do think it's going to take some time. And hopefully they all do transition off the app eventually.
Yeah, that's a good point. I remember there was a tweet that someone said like way back that it was during like the Marvel hype when it first launched, and people were saying like there's no way Marvel will be able to go OpenSea. And I remember Reese actually responded to this tweet, and like I threw it in like 2 videos. So like I need this documented in some way. And like Reese responded and said like, don't be so sure, friend. And like they're just as anxious to get into this space and see the money that's being made. And so like some will take longer to get like fully involved in that side, but I mean, you never know. Like, and I have to like look at like the level of risk that the actual brand or company takes on too. Like that's also one of the reasons why I think localization makes the most sense on why they haven't announced Pokemon. But when you look at Nintendo and the Pokemon company as a actual organization or the company, they're extremely risk averse and so careful with every little conservative, very conservative. So I wonder if the reason why we haven't seen it yet is because they're still trying to figure out how they roll this out best, because obviously everyone's going to want Pokemon into an OpenSea marketplace, Immutable marketplace, all the marketplaces. But it could be where that's why there's that hang up too. Like they want to make sure that they can roll it out jointly with OpenSea and Veve, or they might just be waiting for like all the other brands to tick up first.
Right. Perfectly said.
Awesome, man. Well, this has been great, man. I appreciate you taking time to get rid of this on. There we go. I appreciate you taking time to hop on and kind of spread some mind share to the community and myself. I learned a bunch of things. So I think what you do for this community and the content that you provide on your videos and in Twitter and all that is really like SA quality, right? Like the top-notch quality. So thanks, I appreciate you hopping on here, man, and like just kind of sharing everything with everyone. But please let everyone know like where they can find you, and also any last-minute thoughts or things that you want to say to the community.
Amazing, man. Well, first of all, I just want to say as well, thanks to you. I mean, I used to watch your channel before I even started making a channel. So it's crazy to think that I'm sitting here with you now. So that's remarkable. Yeah. So thanks to you, man. And, I think the last thing I want to say to the community is like, just stay convicted with, this project is, there has been so much FUD that Taps and I have experienced from the beginning. And then now we're seeing all these things come to fruition. Nobody thought Marvel was going to be a thing. Nobody thought Disney was coming. Nobody thought we'd be transitioning to Immutable. All these different things that they've been talking about is happening. They're a great team. You can't sign Disney and not be top notch. It's impossible, right? So I think that's just another thing I want to say. And yeah, look forward to, doing more stuff with you, Taps, in the future, man. And it's been an absolute pleasure to be on. So I really appreciate it. Find me on Twitter at NFT Pirates, on Instagram at NFT Pirates, and on YouTube. And yeah, if you have any questions about collecting, just DM me. I'm usually pretty good to respond and would love to share that knowledge. So thanks so much for having me on, man.
Awesome. You're the man, Chad. And thanks everyone for tuning in. I hope it was valuable for everyone. So again, make sure you subscribe to NFT Pirates. Make sure you subscribe to TapsTrades. Hit that like button. Leave a comment after any questions that we couldn't get to, and maybe Chad will hop in there, or I'll be able to answer some things as well. But thanks so much, Chad. Thanks, everyone. And cheers.
Thanks, man.